A Life to Die For, a podcast presented to you by Melanie and Elodie Fuentes. A podcast about life, death, and the idea that becoming friends with death might help us have more meaningful lives. Talking about it won't kill us, but instead might help us live better. So this is our first episode of our podcast, A Life to Die For, and nobody knows us.
Yeah, exactly. It's so exciting to be here, isn't it?
Very exciting and quite intimidating, I have to say. I think what would be useful now is to introduce ourselves. So would you like to start and tell everybody who you are and what led you to that podcast?
My name is Melanie and I'm originally from Germany, but I have been living in Ireland since 2010. And I live in a town south of Dublin, a small town called Bray. And I run my own complementary therapy practice, Healing Well, where I offer Reiki treatments, Reiki workshops, aroma touch massage, and mindfulness meditation to the general public. Mm-hmm. And since last year, I have been training as a death doula or end-of-life companion with Living Well, Dying Well in the UK. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited to be here. It's so wonderful to actually connect with you all on this podcast.
Yeah, and actually the training is where we met.
Yes. Hard to believe that it is already 1 year ago, isn't it?
Yes, a year ago. But in this time of pandemic, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yes, absolutely.
So I will introduce myself now. I am Elodie, and as you can hear, I'm French, so pardon my English. I've been living in UK for 2 years now, and recently came across the doula work, which deeply resonated with my own story and relationship to death since I was a child. I think what's leading me to this podcast is the fact that I have always been fascinated by death, but as a child, it was really hard to articulate. And I think I quite suffered from the fact that I was being shut out from the family in time of grieving. And I think it was harmful for me, and I think it's harmful for a lot of people not to talk about death and not to bring the subject out, because it's not malicious. It's because it's painful to do so, but I think it's also very useful and important. So this is why throughout my life I was very scared by death. And then one day I realized I had to make friends with death if I wanted to have a life that had sense for me. And I do believe that more and more people are coming and talking to me and saying, I feel I need to talk about that. But some people, they don't want to. So it's nice to have a space with like-minded people. This is what I loved about the doula class, because it's really it's beautiful to be with people like you, Melanie, and people like everyone who really wants to open a dialogue. And sometimes we are surprised. At a party, I met a woman and I didn't think she wanted to talk about it, but we spoke about death the whole evening. And I thought it was going to depress her, but actually she was fascinated.
Yes, and I suppose our stories, your and my story, Elodie, are quite similar in that I've always been fascinated by death too. And I've always felt that death is something very precious and an innate part of life that we shouldn't try to shut out, because we can't shut it out. Death is something inevitable. It will happen to all of us. And as a child, I realized that there was very little talk in my family about death and dying. And it was almost as if death and dying were things that shouldn't be talked about, because it was almost like the superstition that you could maybe bring it on by talking about it too much. Mm-hmm. And I experienced I had a friend in primary school who suffered from leukemia. And one day she wasn't coming back to school, and I didn't realize what was happening to her. But what was actually happening was that she was at home getting some stem cell treatment or whatever it was back then. And she returned to school for a couple of weeks. And then we all realized that she wasn't well. And one day she didn't come back, and they told us that she had died. And I really wanted to know more about how did she die? How was that experience for her? How were the final days of her life? And of course, nobody talked about it. And then when I was 18 years old, I discovered that there was a hospice in the town where I was living back then. That was a town called Marburg in Germany. And that hospice was looking for volunteers, and I was eager to do the volunteering. I really felt it would be so lovely to actually meet people who were dying and sit with them or do tasks for them, you know, whatever they needed, go in and support the nurses maybe with their work, or the doctors who were on call. And so I volunteered with this hospice for 6 months. And everybody, again, you know, in my family and even my friends were saying to me, why are you doing that? You're only 18 years old. And every time they said that to me, I felt I couldn't understand why they were saying this, because to me, the fact that I was 18 years old, or as they put it, only 18 years old and very young still, didn't mean that death didn't concern me. And I felt even back then very strongly that it could affect me as much as everybody else at any given moment of our life, you know. And so then I went into my holistic therapies, and I have worked with many people over the years who were experiencing bereavement after the death of a close loved one. And I've always found that very informative and very fascinating to help people and guide them through this very, very painful journey, and be of comfort to them in that. And mainly I found that this comfort meant to help them open up about their loss, about their own fears about death and dying, and to be able to talk about their bereavement and what the bereavement has done for most of those people. And that's what I found really interesting to realize, was that they were living a much more happy and much fuller life, and much more engaged, because they now knew that death could happen to them at any moment, and that they would be a great loss to somebody who loved them dearly. So then my husband he had cancer, and he passed away from his advanced prostate cancer in 2018. And it was after that that I realized I really want to work with dying people, but also with people going through bereavement. And I found the organization in the UK, Living Well, Dying Well, which is where Elodie and I are doing our training, a couple of months after my husband's death. And I knew this was going to be my training, and this was going to be the work that I wanted, that I was going to do, to work with dying people and their families. And then it was only in December 2020 that Elodie, in a nice phone call one evening, told me about her idea to make this podcast. And I said, wow, I'd really love to do that with you. And so here we are. This is what has brought us together here today.
Wow, this is so fascinating. All your story, your life, and how it comes all together around this this calling of taking care of the dying. And also, to me, it's it's not sad to say, but we are all dying since the day we are born. And taking care of the living is the same thing as taking care of the dying, in the sense that we are at different stages in our lives, but we are all at a certain point. And one thing is sure, is that we are all going to die at some point. And I think that it's a shame to wait the last month, the last days of life. Well, if you don't have a choice, I mean, let's accept it. But it will be so helpful to focus on how we view death before we are told that we have a terminal illness, so we can really have as little regret as possible. I know it's like an idealistic view, but I do believe that taking conscience, living consciously and dying consciously is possible. And I'm not saying that I'm a done deal and I am living consciously every day, but it's what I'm working towards. And this is the point of this podcast, is not for Melanie and me to say to people, look how well we are doing. It's not at all. It's just to exchange and open a conversation. There are many podcasts about death. More and more things are being done, death cafes and festivals, and I think it's wonderful. And this is what I want to be a part of. And this is really what, for me, I discovered in these last 2 years, because before I was fascinated by death, but I didn't want to be necessarily around it. I was, for me, expressing my death anxiety as a teenager was watching horror movies. I was watching horror movies, so many, and I couldn't sleep at night. So it's really funny, because I think we all have that inside of us, but in different, it expresses differently. Um, so
Well, I
yeah.
think that's so true. I think we are all thinking about death. And I think in our society, unfortunately, it's not talked about as much as it should be. So, you either have thoughts about death that you feel you can't voice anywhere because people wouldn't want to listen, or you feel you might frighten them talking about your thoughts or feelings around death and dying. But then there's also this whole thing of, I think because our society is so, it's what it is today. And let's face it, it's very speedy. We have to be somebody, we have to be good at something all the time. We have to succeed. There's a lot of pressure. And even now in the pandemic, there is this pressure of, okay, what am I going to do? How can I live my life better? What have I not done, which, what I should be doing? And I think life sometimes becomes more about achievements and how I can better myself. And it's not enough about how I should live this moment in order to, as Elodie says, not have a regret at the end of my life that I feel I haven't spoken to the people I should have spoken to enough. I haven't expressed my love enough to the people who really should have heard it and who would have benefited from me saying it. So all these things, and very much like you, Elodie, I'm not at all perfect at this, and I would never, never, ever say I was. There are many days when I get carried away by the busyness of life, where I feel I have to succeed and I have to be brilliant at everything and whatever else. But there are also times through my mindfulness meditation practice where I feel it's really about this present moment. And if I live this present moment well, then it will lead me to a better understanding of what my life is about, and also into a more peaceful and more confident death in a way, because I've really done all I could, rather than just going along, swimming with the stream, trying to succeed, but I actually think it is so valuable to stop sometimes and to say, life right now is what matters. And this is also very much what this podcast is about, to really invite you all to think about, what is my life about right now, and what is meaningful to me right now in
Yes.
this present moment.
Yes,
And
definitely.
how would that help me coming closer to death, to see that I have really lived
Yes.
open-heartedly and from genuineness.
Yeah. I think, yeah, it's maybe this is what the title of the podcast is about. So it is a life to die for. So why this title? What does that mean? Well, I think usually what we say is that, oh, this cake is to die for. Like I would die for a bite of this cake. And I think life is quite similar to this cake. It's something we can die for and we will die for. So meanwhile, what I mean is that we should really embrace this life, because the what it costs is the end of it. But it's like going on holiday. It's like when you go on holiday, you really enjoy your holiday because you know it's going to end at some point. And I think death in that regard is our friend, because it really gives life its preciousness, its value. And this is what we wanted to mean by the title of the podcast. And this is the topic that will be throughout all of the episodes, even if we are going to talk about different things. But this is the main thing, is that recognizing death at an early stage in life. And this is why I think also it's really important to talk about it to children and not to shut them out. Having this conscience of death really makes life more meaningful. I'm thinking, I don't know if you read that book by Marie de Henezel, who is a French woman who worked in palliative care, and she wrote a book called Seize the Day.
Yes.
And she said in it that when she was a child, she used to go in cemeteries all the time, and she was walking among the graves. But far from making her a very melancholic child, she was a very lively child, because actually being surrounded by those graves made her really cherish her life and what she had. So it's not about like sulking and being like miserable. Oh, we are going to die. It's not that. It's we are going to die. So this is amazing because life is beautiful. And
Yes.
it's really about it. Really, it's about that. And I feel like I fear death. I do fear it sometimes. I know some people don't, or are at the stage of not really fearing it. But what I want is really acknowledging what a friend death is, because life is nothing without death. We wouldn't be alive if death didn't exist.
Yeah,
So
exactly. I mean, imagine if it went on forever and ever and ever. Nothing would really mean anything, because we could always have this very same experience that we're having today. We could have that again tomorrow or next week or next month or in a year's time. And the same with our friends, relatives, the ones we love, the ones very, very close to us. If we thought they were going to be with us forever, the encounters wouldn't mean as much, because we could always repeat them. And the fact is we can't. But that is exactly what I think too, Elodie, that we can either get miserable and think, oh my God, life is just, it's sad, isn't it? Because it's not going to go on forever. And, soon I will lose everyone I have and everything I have. But at the same time, and I think this is the view that we really want to help our listeners develop, is that we can rejoice in life because we know that it is going to end, and that makes it all the more precious. It is actually this precious because we know that it is not going to last forever. So we really, really and truly have to make the most of it now that we have it, and now that we are here to live it and experience it in all its different forms. And that doesn't always come with joy and happiness. And there are days when when we feel really bad. And especially now during this pandemic, I think there are many people who are so frustrated and feel isolated and wish for things to be different. But it is still the life we lead right now that is important. And this pandemic is just one part of it, or one way in which life shows itself. But even that comes with so much joy, a lovely phone call with a friend, a lovely family meeting on Zoom, or when you go to bed at night and you think about, what am I grateful for? Thinking back through today. I mean, most of us could come up with a lot of things, even the smallest things, like even having had a lovely breakfast, or having had a nice walk through the brisk winter air. I don't know what it is like where you are, but
it's
here
cold.
we have a lot of snow at the moment.
It's super cold right now.
It's precious. It's beautiful, because there will be warmer days again. And then we will say, oh, this is a lovely spring day, and isn't it so nice to have the summer again?
Yeah.
But for now, it is beautiful as it is and as it expresses itself. So I really hope that our listeners will get, and I know you do as well, that they will get this from our podcast as well, that life is really to die for, in the sense that it is wonderful while we have it, and that it is to die for also in the true sense, or the true meaning of the word, because as Elodie pointed out before, we are going to die. And from the moment we are born, we are dying.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to make us sad.
Yeah, but I mean, it can make us sad too. I mean, it's
can,
fine.
yeah.
It's totally fine to be sad about it, and angry sometimes about it, and depressed about it. But I think what is really important in that is to talk about it, and not because it's everybody's business. And if there is one thing that we all have in common, regardless of where we come from, what language we speak, our gender, or anything, is that we are all going to die. It's our mortality. And I think a lot of people feel alone through that, and they don't have to. We don't have to be alone regarding our own mortality or the mortality of the people we love. I have someone I know. I was talking about my training as a doula, and she was really really weirded out by it. And she said that she had a relative who died in her living room because she was caring for him. And I was like, this is amazing that you did that. And she said, it was the worst experience of my life. I was completely alone, and I didn't know what to do. I was freaked out. I didn't want to go in the room with him. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And my heart broke when she said that. I felt like you would have so much benefited from the help and the support of a carer or a doula, someone who will hold your hand and say, it's okay. It's fine to be scared. And it really broke my heart to know that she went alone through that experience, because it doesn't have to be like that. And a lot of people are scared. When I told my family I was going to do a doula course, end of life doula, because people, when you say doula, they think about birth, and they don't really know there is also a doula for death. And they were like, are you sure you want to do that? Elodie, you're going to see people, dead people. Like, yeah, I understand this is the point. And I think it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of protection. Our parents want to protect us. And as a child, I'm sure this is what they wanted to do. When my mom was pregnant with a baby, and I was about to become a big sister, but the baby died while he was still in a womb. And for me, it was something I didn't understand for a very long time, because he was there and the next day he wasn't. And we didn't do any ceremony. We didn't talk about it for years. And it really started there. I was 5 years old, and this is where my death anxiety started. I didn't
Yes.
understand. I thought I was always telling my mom growing up, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to die. And I was crying because I was thinking, if something inside of her disappeared like that, why shouldn't she
Mm.
disappear like that?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was really hard for me to understand what death was. And I don't blame my parents, because they were too much into their own sorrow. And it's very hard to find the words when you didn't grow up in an environment where death was talked about and accepted. So I understand where they come from. But for me, it was really harmful, I'll say. Not dramatic, because I'm fine and I'm happy to have the life I had, and I think it made me who I am, so it's fine. But I wish something else for my children. I think they maybe underestimated my capacity to understand death. I
Mm.
think we can all, even if we say, oh, they are so little, they won't understand, they can understand that there is sorrow, that someone has died, even if it's not the same understanding as us. Maybe they don't understand it's permanent, but they will come to that. But I think it's really harmful to shut kids out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, what you're saying there, it reminds me so much of what meditation teacher Tara Brach is saying. And I would really invite everybody to check her out, because she's a wonderful meditation teacher, and she teaches this technique called RAIN, which is the acronym, RAIN, and it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and non-judgment, or also nurture. And it's all about this process of having an emotion, recognizing it, and then allowing it to be there, investigating where it comes from, where it stems from, how long has it been there, is it old, is it actually from you, or has it come down, has it been brought down by your parents to you, or your grandparents? And then you nourish with what would help you to navigate this difficulty and this emotion, and what would help you to live with it. And I think what you're describing is so much true for all emotions that we are experiencing, that once you don't talk about them, once you avoid them, once you deny them, they will manifest themselves in as anxiety, or as sometimes physical pain, because it's unprocessed. It's like, rather than accepting that this feeling is there, like for you as a 5-year-old, to really be able to ask, where is he gone? Why was he there one day and then not there the next? And could you now disappear as well because something inside you did? These questions have to be asked, and they have to be discussed, because otherwise you develop anxiety and worries and fear around that. So that is a very powerful thing to share.
Yeah, it's the silence, I think. And it's really interesting what you're saying, because I think this anxiety I felt, I think we all feel it at some degree, because as a society, as a Western society, we are all not talking about it. It's not just in my family, but in the Western society, in this world of medicine and science, where we can prolong life so much now, we are fighting against death as if it was our enemy. So we say he lost. I really like Catherine Mannix in a book, when she says, her book With the End in Mind, where she says that we have a warrior language
Yes.
towards death.
Yes.
We say he lost his battle against cancer, or keep fighting, So of course I totally understand, and I'm for it, to prolong life as long as possible in the right conditions, not for your body, but also for your soul and for your mind, which is like not being like clinging to life as if death was just so awful, because I don't think it is. And the thing is we don't really have a choice in that regard, is that even if we accept it or we don't accept it, it will happen. So better accept it now so we can be more peaceful about it. But we never know what will happen. But I think this anxiety we live as a society, like this all antidepressants and depressions and people who are having burnouts, and I don't say it's all related to death denial, but I think it has a great this death denial has a great part in it, because we don't talk about it as a society, and because we think death is a curse word, and we think it's not. We say he passed away, we say he left us, he's not here anymore, or blah blah blah. We rarely say he died, period. So it's about also naming things. I think it's really helpful, and seeing things, like this woman I talked to one time at a party. She said she was 50 years old, and she said she had never seen a dead body in her life. And I thought
Yes.
it wouldn't have happened 200 years ago, because you saw dead body all the time, because everybody died all the time. And now, thanks to science, we can live better lives, longer lives. So that's amazing. But the downside of it is that we lose touch with our nature, the fact that we are part of nature, and there is
Yes.
science and medicine, and we are in those cities. And even if we live in the countryside, we still have so much gadgets and technology. I think we have this feeling of maybe we are immortal, but we're not.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think Catherine Mannix in her book, she and that is I really would encourage everyone to check it out. It's called With the End in Mind, as Elodie said. And Catherine Mannix is a retired palliative care doctor in the UK, and her mission really is to demystify death. And I think that's such a wonderful expression, to demystify it, because, well, we are here to talk about what makes life really worth living in, when we know that death is a part of our life, and it's unavoidable. So that is one thing. But the other thing is to see that death is not such a mystery. And I think our modern medicine, as you just said there, makes it seem like it is something that we can't come in contact with. It can be, they talk about deaths being terrible and really heartbreaking to watch. And then once your relative has died, you are not supposed to stay in the room with them for a long time. If it's in a hospital or in a hospice, you often find yourself being rushed out because they want to wash the body, they want to prepare the body, they want to bring it down to the mortuary. If your relative dies at home, or your friend or whoever it is, you're being encouraged to ring the funeral directors, fairly soon, not leave this person at home with you for too long. But as you said there, 200 years ago, this wouldn't have happened, because the person would have been at home. In many cases, would have been visited by friends and people, even from, relatives or friends who wanted to say their goodbyes. And that would have been absolutely normal. And people would have taken care of this in their community. But nowadays, it's all, once a person is dead, don't look, don't come too close, and don't even say the word death. Say passed away, passed on, gone, has left us, all these words that don't really describe what is happening, because what is happening is that this person has lived their life and has died now. And even this expression of, oh, he or she went too early, I don't think we can say that really, because I know there are illnesses and there are conditions from which people die very early on in life. They have a very short life compared to others, and that can make us feel very sad. It can make us feel angry with the way life is, with the unfairness of it all. But at the same time, to recognize that this is what happens. And this has always happened throughout history. People have always had a life to live, and at some stage it ended. And I think it is something that we really need to talk about in terms of how to demystify death and how to bring it back into people's experience as something that is not threatening and that is not terrible, but it's just a fact of life. Living means that we are going to die.
It's the deal.
So I suppose if that's okay with you, Elodie, I think it would be good to give our listeners a brief reflection now to maybe wrap up this first episode and have them consider all of what we have talked about, really, which was a lot for our first episode, I think, by maybe just suggesting to think about how the fact, just imagine for a second, if you were to die 5 years from now, and you knew that for a fact. So there's no uncertainty. You know that today, 5 years from now, you are going to die. How would that fact inform your life today? How would it inform your feeling about your life today? How would it inform your decisions about your life?
You've been listening to A Life to Die For. We wish you well until our next episode, where Melanie will be our guest and share with us about her own experience of love and loss. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you to Daniel Hughes for the original music and Lucy Baile for letting us use a beautiful painting. Any feedback, comments and questions will be warmly welcomed at alifetodiefor in one word @gmail.com.